The stars stretched endlessly before the human ship as it drifted through the void. Commander Hugh sat in the captain's chair, his fingers drumming nervously against the armrest. This was it. First contact with alien civilization. Everything humanity had dreamed about for centuries was about to become real. Dabin, the young pilot, glanced back from her station. Her hands were steady on the controls, but Hyuk could see the excitement in her eyes. Next to her, Minji monitored the engineering systems, making sure their faster-than-light drive was running perfectly. They couldn't afford any mistakes today. At the communications console, Yuna was already preparing the translation protocols they'd spent months developing. The diplomatic vessel Sejong had traveled 3 weeks to reach this location, a massive space station orbiting a planet the aliens called Sanctuary Prime. When the invitation had come, Earth's governments had debated for days. Some wanted to refuse, fearing a trap. Others argued this was humanity's chance to join the galactic community. In the end, curiosity and hope won. The station appeared on their view screen, and Hyuk heard Minji gasp. It was enormous, easily 50 times larger than anything humans had ever built. Crystalline towers spiraled upward from a central ring that glowed with soft blue light. Hundreds of ships of various designs docked at ports along its surface. This was the heart of something called the Galactic Council, a governing body that oversaw thousands of worlds. Yuna's console beeped. "Commander, we're receiving docking instructions." Hugh nodded. "Follow them exactly, Dabin. Let's not give them any reason to doubt our intentions." The Sejong glided smoothly into the designated bay. Through the viewports, Hyuk could see other ships, some insectoid in design, others flowing like liquid metal frozen in impossible shapes. Each one represented a species humanity had never imagined. His heart raced with wonder and fear in equal measure. The docking clamps secured with a metallic thud. Hyuk stood, adjusting his formal uniform. He'd brought gifts, carefully selected to represent the best of human culture. Art prints from masters across the centuries. Recordings of symphonies and traditional music from every continent. Scientific papers showing humanity's achievements. He wanted the galaxy to see Earth as civilized, peaceful, ready to learn and share. The airlock cycled open, and Hyuk stepped into a corridor that seemed to shift colors as he moved. His small delegation followed, all trying not to stare too obviously at their surroundings. They were led by a floating sphere that pulsed with light, apparently their guide. No words were exchanged. The sphere simply moved, and they followed. The council chamber was breathtaking. A vast circular room with a transparent floor that looked down into the depths of space. Representatives from dozens of species sat in tiered seating, their forms varying wildly. Some were vaguely humanoid. Others defied easy description. At the center was a raised platform where Hugh was directed to stand. A tall, thin creature with 4 arms and skin, like polished stone, stepped forward. Yuna's earpiece crackled as the translation software worked. "I am Thalos, representative of the Vex Collective. We have summoned you to explain yourselves." Hugh blinked. Summoned? He'd thought this was a welcoming ceremony. "Thank you for this opportunity," he began carefully. "Humanity comes in peace, seeking friendship and knowledge." Thalos made a gesture that might have been dismissive. "Your species achieved faster-than-light travel only 12 cycles ago. Yet you have spread to 6 star systems. This rapid expansion concerns us." Another representative spoke, this one resembling a massive crustacean. "We have studied your planet's transmissions. Your history is filled with warfare, constant conflict between your own kind. Why should we believe you come in peace?" Hyuk felt his jaw tighten, but kept his voice calm. "Every species has a troubled past. Humanity has learned from our mistakes. We've united our world. We seek only to learn our place among the stars." Thalos projected a hologram into the center of the room. It showed Earth slowly rotating. Your world is rich in resources. Your species breeds quickly and adapts to harsh conditions. The Council has determined that humanity requires oversight. You will accept development restrictions. Your expansion will be limited to your current systems. Council monitors will be stationed on Earth to ensure compliance. The words hit Hugh like a physical blow. Oversight? Restrictions? With respect, humanity is a sovereign species. We will not submit to external control. A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. Thalas's skin seemed to darken. You misunderstand your position. You are primitives who have barely left your cradle world. The Council maintains galactic order. You will comply, or you will be brought into compliance. Hugh's mind raced. This wasn't first contact. It was a trial. They'd already decided humanity's fate before the Sejong even arrived. We came here in good faith, he said, his voice harder now. We offered friendship. You offer subjugation. We offer protection, Thalos corrected. Protection from yourselves and from species that would exploit your weakness. You have one standard cycle to accept our terms. If you refuse, corrective measures will be taken. Hugh gathered the gifts he'd brought and placed them carefully on the platform. Then let these stand as a reminder. Humanity could have been your friends. He turned to his crew. We're leaving. The journey back to Earth felt much longer than 3 weeks. Hyuk sent messages ahead, preparing the United Earth government for what was coming. When they finally reached home, he was immediately summoned to Geneva. President Jiwan sat at the head of a table, surrounded by representatives from every nation. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Commander Hyuk, tell us everything. He did, leaving out nothing. When he finished, the room erupted in argument. Some voices called for submission. Why fight beings so much more advanced? Others demanded defiance. Humanity had not united Earth, only to bow to alien masters. Chi, one let them argue for an hour before raising her hand for silence. The question is simple, she said. Do we remain free, or do we accept chains because they're offered by beings with better technology? She looked around the table. I call for a vote. It wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. 70% voted to refuse the Council's terms. Ji-won nodded slowly. Then we prepare. Commander Hyuk, return to your ship. I'm promoting you to Admiral. You'll need to start training our defense forces. As Hyuk left the chamber, he looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the blue, the Vex Collective was preparing their response. Earth had only months, maybe less. But humanity had not survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars by surrendering when threatened. The message went out to the Council exactly 1 cycle later. 3 words that would echo through galactic history. We decline. The Vex Ninth Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system like a swarm of metallic locusts. 200 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Admiral Thalos stood on the bridge of his flagship, confident in the power arrayed before him. This would be simple. A demonstration of force, a few destroyed human installations, and the primitives would surrender. Open a channel to the 3rd planet, he commanded, on Earth. President Jiwan sat in the emergency command center, buried deep beneath Geneva. The walls were lined with screens, showing defense positions throughout the solar system. Military commanders from every nation stood ready. When Thalas's face appeared on the main display, the room fell silent. Humans of Earth, Thalos began, his forearms spread wide. You have made a foolish choice. This is your final opportunity. Surrender now, and your species will be spared. Refuse, and we will demonstrate why the Council's authority is absolute. Ji-won leaned forward, her expression calm. We gave you our answer. We decline. She made a cutting gesture, and the transmission ended. Thalos stared at the blank screen in disbelief. They'd actually refused. He turned to his tactical officer. Begin the assault. Target their orbital installations. Avoid the planet itself. We want them conquered, not exterminated. The Vex fleet advanced, their shields glowing as they prepared to fire. They expected desperate resistance from primitive weapons. They expected fear and chaos. What they didn't expect was silence. The asteroid belt erupted. Hidden among the rocks and ice, hundreds of human installations powered up. Magnetic accelerators that had been disguised as mining equipment swiveled toward the advancing fleet. Captain Suho, commanding the Earth Defense Forces carrier Inshin, smiled grimly as his tactical officer Hyeri began feeding targeting data to every gun in the belt. All stations, this is Inshin, Suho broadcast. Fire at will. The asteroids lit up like stars being born. Tungsten rods, each one weighing several tons, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. The Vex shields were designed to deflect energy weapons, to absorb laser fire and particle beams. They were not designed for solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The first rod punched through a Vex cruiser's shield like it wasn't there, continued through the hull, and exited the other side. The ship's reactor containment failed, and it vanished in a flash of white light. Then another ship died, and another. Thalos watched in horror as his fleet began taking casualties. Return fire. Destroy those installations. But the asteroids were moving, rotating, presenting different faces to the enemy. The Vex energy weapons scored the rock, but couldn't penetrate deep enough to reach the bunkers inside. And all the while, the railguns kept firing. Launch fires. Suho commanded. From hidden bays on the Inshin and 3 other carriers, human fighters poured into space. They were small, barely larger than atmospheric craft, with minimal life support and armor. The Vex saw them and felt a moment of relief. Surely these tiny vessels couldn't threaten their mighty warships. They were wrong. The human fighters were fast, far faster than Vex designs. They darted between the larger ships like birds of prey, too quick for the lumbering weapons to track. And they carried missiles, simple chemical rockets with shaped charges that could cut through armor when delivered with precision. A flight of 6 fighters, led by a pilot named Borum, dove toward a Vex destroyer. Point defense fire filled the space around them with deadly energy, but they chinked and weaved through it. At the last moment, they released their missiles and broke away. 8 projectiles slammed into the destroyer's engine section. The ship went dark, drifting helplessly. Thalos couldn't believe what he was seeing. His technologically superior fleet was being torn apart by primitives using kinetic weapons. Weapons his people had abandoned thousands of years ago as crude and inefficient. He'd forgotten the simple truth that a rock moving fast enough could kill just as effectively as any energy beam. All ships, withdraw to defensive formation, he ordered, trying to salvage the situation. But humanity wasn't done. From the Inshin, Suho launched the second phase of the defense. Boarding pods. Small armored capsules designed to carry Marines directly into enemy ships. The Vex saw them coming and tried to shoot them down, but there were too many, and they were too small. Engineer Doyon led the first boarding team. His pod slammed into the hull of a Vex cruiser, cutting torches burning through the armor. Atmosphere vented, alarms screamed, and then Doyon and his squad were inside. The Vex soldiers rushed to repel the boarders. They outnumbered the humans 3-1. It should have been an easy fight. But the Vex had evolved on a world with half Earth's gravity and a thinner atmosphere. Their bodies were light, optimized for efficiency. Humans were built for survival on a harsh, heavy world. Doyon, encased in powered combat armor, that enhanced his already formidable strength, crashed into the first Vex soldier like a freight train. The alien went flying, its light bones breaking from the impact. Another Vex tried to fire a weapon, but Doyon covered the distance between them in 2 strides and simply tore the gun from its hands. His squad moved through the ship like a force of nature. The Vex fled before them, these monsters that could rip through bulkheads with their bare hands, that could survive in conditions that would kill any civilized species. Within an hour, Dion's team had seized the engineering section and forced the crew to surrender. Across the battle space, similar scenes played out. Human boarding parties took ship after ship. The Vex, realizing they couldn't win in close combat, began self-destructing their vessels rather than let them be captured. Belos watched his fleet crumble. Of the 200 ships he'd brought, less than 60 remained combat effective. The rest were destroyed, disabled, or captured. This was impossible. These were primitives. They'd achieved faster-than-light travel only recently. They shouldn't be capable of this. "Retreat," he whispered. Then louder, "All ships, retreat. Emergency jump now." The surviving Vex vessels turned and fled, jumping back into faster-than-light travel in a desperate scramble. They left behind wreckage and the captured ships, abandoned their dead and wounded. The mighty Ninth Fleet had been routed. On the Inchin, Suho watched them go. His crew was cheering, celebrating the victory. But Suho felt no joy. He just fought the opening battle of what would surely be a long war. The Council wouldn't accept this defeat. They'd come back with more ships, more fury. Hyeri approached him, her face flushed with excitement. "Sir, preliminary count shows we destroyed or captured over 140 enemy vessels. Our losses are minimal. 12 fighters, 1 asteroid station, and the Bizon took heavy damage but will survive." Suho nodded slowly. "Send recovery teams to collect survivors from the wreckage. Theirs and ours. Begin repairs immediately. And get me a secure channel to President G1. When the president's face appeared on his screen, she looked tired but determined. "Captain Suho, well done." "It's not over, ma'am," Suho said. "They'll be back. And next time, they'll know what to expect." Jiwan smiled without humor. "Then we'll have to show them something new. Admiral Hyuk has a plan. We're not going to wait for them to attack again. Humanity is going on the offensive." Suho felt a chill run down his spine. Offensive? Against an enemy that controlled thousands of worlds? But as he thought about it, he realized it made sense. The Council expected humans to cower behind their defenses. They wouldn't expect Earth to bring the fight to them that far away. In the Council chambers on Sanctuary Prime, the news of the Ninth Fleet's destruction caused panic. Some species began withdrawing their support, wanting nothing to do with a war against these terrifying humans. Others, like the Vex, burned with rage and humiliation. The Council voted to continue the war. They would crush humanity, wipe them from the stars as a lesson to any other species that dared defy galactic order. They began gathering their fleets, calling in favors and debts, preparing an armada that would blacken the sky. But they didn't understand. They'd attacked humans, and humans didn't just defend. Humanity had spent its entire history learning one brutal lesson: when threatened, attack. When cornered, fight. When facing extinction, take your enemies with you. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you declared war on apex predators. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. The chamber that had once been filled with confident voices now echoed with fear and anger. Representatives shouted at each other, blaming everyone but themselves for the disaster at Earth. 2 species had already withdrawn from the Council entirely, declaring neutrality and sealing their borders. 3 others were considering the same. The unified front against humanity was cracking before the real war had even begun. Thalos stood before them, his shame visible in the way his 4 arms hung limply at his sides. "The humans are more dangerous than we calculated," he admitted. "But we can still win through numbers. The Vex Collective commits our entire fleet. 10,000 warships. We will crush them." Other representatives pledged their own forces. Slowly, grudgingly, the Council rebuilt its confidence. Yes, they'd suffered a setback, but they commanded the resources of hundreds of worlds. Humanity controlled barely 6 systems. Mathematics alone dictated the outcome. What they didn't know was that humanity had no intention of waiting for that armada to arrive. Admiral Junho stood on the bridge of the new flagship Indomitable, watching the final preparations for Operation Righteous Fury. Beside him, Vice Admiral Sora reviewed the tactical plans one last time. They'd spent weeks analyzing captured Vex data, identifying critical targets across Council space. 3 simultaneous strikes, Sora said, highlighting locations on the star map. Vexus Prime, their homeworld; Forge Station, their main shipyard; and Meridian Gate, the trade hub that finances their military. Junho nodded. "The Council thinks in terms of honorable warfare. They'll expect us to defend our borders. They won't expect us to hit them where they live." The first expeditionary fleet consisted of 200 ships, everything Earth could spare while still maintaining home defense. It wasn't many compared to the Council's numbers, but Junho was counting on surprise and human ingenuity to even the odds. Captain Nari commanded one of the new stealth ships, the Soul. Her vessel was coated in materials that absorbed sensor scans and could run silent for weeks at a time. Her mission was to deploy the latest weapon from Earth's scientists, autonomous mines with artificial intelligence. The mines weren't simple explosives. Each one had a basic computer mind that could identify enemy ships, adjust its trajectory, and hunt targets actively. Once deployed in an area, they would create a deadly web that enemy fleets would have to navigate carefully or die trying. Nari's ship slipped into the Forge Station system 3 days before the main attack. She moved slowly, using the system's asteroid field for cover. The station itself was enormous, a massive construction facility where the Council built their warships. Hundreds of vessels in various stages of completion floated in the yards, protected by defensive platforms and patrol ships. "Deploy mines," Nari whispered, though there was no need for quiet in the vacuum of space. Thousands of small spheres drifted from the Soul's cargo bay, spreading throughout the system. They were cold, inert, invisible to sensors. And they were waiting. Meanwhile, Commander Tai Young led a destroyer wing toward Meridian Gate. His ships used new quantum communication systems that allowed instant coordination across light years. Where the Council's forces had to rely on delayed messages, human ships could act as a single unified mind. Meridian Gate was a massive space station at the intersection of 3 major trade routes. Cargo ships from hundreds of worlds passed through daily, paying fees that filled the Council's treasury. It was defended, but lightly. Who would attack a civilian trade hub? Humanity would. Taiyang's force came out of faster-than-light travel right on top of the station. The defenders barely had time to raise shields before missiles were already slamming into their defensive platforms. Human fighters swept through the traffic lanes, forcing merchant ships to flee or face destruction. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Taiyang commanded. "This is Earth Defense Forces. Civilian vessels have 10 minutes to evacuate. Any military vessels that remain will be destroyed." The Council forces tried to mount a defense, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Taiyang's destroyers moved with perfect coordination, their quantum links allowing them to anticipate each other's movements like dancers in a deadly ballet. Within an hour, the Council's military presence was obliterated. Then Taiyang did something that shocked the watching aliens. He didn't destroy the station. Instead, He crippled its docking systems and communications, leaving it unable to function but intact. The civilians aboard were frightened, but alive. "We're not monsters," Tai Young said to his crew. "We're soldiers." "There's a difference." At Vexus Prime, the main assault was led by Admiral Junho himself. The Vex homeworld was heavily defended, with orbital weapons platforms and 3 full fleets protecting it. This would be the hardest fight. Junho brought humanity's newest weapon, nanite swarms. Scientist Yunbi had developed clouds of microscopic machines that could disassemble matter at the molecular level. Released near an enemy ship, they would consume the hull, turning solid metal into clouds of atoms. The Vex fleets moved to intercept the human forces, confident in their numbers. They outnumbered Junho 5-1. But then the nanite clouds deployed, invisible to the eye, spreading through space like an infection. The first Vex cruiser to encounter the swarm simply came apart. Its hull dissolved, internal structures collapsed, and the crew died in the vacuum. Then another ship fell victim, and another. The Vex scattered in panic, unable to fight an enemy they couldn't see. But Junho didn't press his advantage to destroy the entire fleet. Instead, he sent a message directly to the Vex homeworld. "Surrender. Your military forces and your civilians will not be harmed. Continue fighting, and we will demonstrate why Earth's apex predators survived every extinction event our world could throw at them." The Vex leadership faced an impossible choice: surrender or watch their homeworld die. After 6 hours of debate, they lowered their shields and accepted human occupation. Junho established a blockade, but didn't land troops on the planet. He didn't need to conquer Vexus Prime. He just needed to prove he could. Back at Forge Station, Nari's minds activated as the Council sent reinforcements to investigate the loss of contact. The first battleship to enter the system triggered a cascade. Minds swarmed toward it like schools of fish, overwhelming its defenses through sheer numbers. The ship died in seconds. The Council forces tried to clear the mines with long range fire, but the artificial intelligence made each mine a challenging target. They adapted to tactics, learned from each attempt to destroy them, and became harder to kill. What should have been a simple cleanup operation turned into a weeks-long siege dot, and with Forge Station cut off, the Council lost 60% of their shipbuilding capacity overnight. Across Council space, similar attacks played out. Human forces struck supply depots, communications relays, and strategic choke points. They didn't try to hold territory. They simply destroyed the Council's ability to wage war effectively. But the most shocking thing about the human offensive wasn't the destruction. It was the mercy. Before every attack, humans broadcast warnings. Civilian ships were allowed to flee. Prisoners were treated well. Wounded enemies received medical care. The galaxy watched in confusion. These were supposed to be savage primitives, violent by nature. Yet they fought with a code of honor the supposedly civilized Council had. Abandoned. President G1 addressed the Council from Earth, her message broadcast on every channel. "We didn't want this war. You forced it upon us. But understand this. We will fight until you can no longer threaten us. However, we take no joy in killing. Surrender your forces, accept peace, and we will help rebuild what we've destroyed. Continue fighting, and we will continue to demonstrate why threatening humanity was the worst mistake your Council ever made." Some Council species began secret peace negotiations. Others dug in, determined to defeat the humans through attrition. But as the weeks passed and the casualties mounted, more and more of them began to wonder if victory was even possible. The Vex Collective's supreme commander, an ancient warrior named Veskara, watched the reports with growing dread. She'd fought in dozens of wars across centuries. She'd seen species rise and fall, but she'd never seen anything like humanity. They fought with the ferocity of wild beasts, but the discipline of trained soldiers. They struck with the cunning of predators, but showed mercy like civilized beings. They were a contradiction, an impossibility, and they were winning. Niskara began planning one final offensive. She would gather every ship the Council could muster and strike at Earth itself. If humanity's whole world fell, the war would end. It was a desperate gamble, but she saw no other option. The galaxy held its breath as the largest fleet in recorded history began to assemble. Humanity had won battles, but the true test was coming. 3 months into the war, the Galactic Council was bleeding from 1,000 cuts. Human raiders appeared without warning, struck hard, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Supply lines that had operated for millennia were now death traps. Economic networks collapsed as merchants refused to risk their ships. 5 more species had withdrawn from the Council, declaring neutrality and closing their borders. The Grand Alliance that was supposed to crush humanity had fractured into desperate factions, each trying to salvage what they could from the disaster. Commander Minho led the Special Operations Group that made life hell for the Council's remaining forces. His team moved like ghosts through enemy territory, appearing where they shouldn't be able to reach. Demolitions expert Gina could turn a military depot into scrap metal with frightening efficiency. Hacker Seojun could infiltrate Council networks and steal intelligence or broadcast propaganda. On a moon orbiting a gas giant in Council space, Minho's team infiltrated a major communications hub. The facility processed military orders for 12 nearby systems. Guards patrolled the perimeter, but they were watching for ships, not individuals. Gina placed charges with surgical precision, while Seojun jacked into the network. Within minutes, he downloaded operational plans and uploaded a virus that would corrupt their tactical databases. When they left, the facility erupted in flames behind them, taking weeks of strategic planning with it. But Minho did something unexpected. The facility's staff had already evacuated, thanks to the warning his team broadcasted. As they fled to their extraction point, Minho's squad encountered a group of wounded Council soldiers, casualties from a recent skirmish. The easy choice was to leave them. The smart choice, even. Minho ordered his team to stabilize the wounded and transmit their location to Council rescue services. Gina stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Sir, they're the enemy." "They're soldiers following orders," Minho replied. "Same as us. We fight the war, not the warriors." This pattern repeated across Council space. Human forces destroyed military targets with brutal efficiency, but went out of their way to minimize casualties. They treated prisoners well, provided medical care to enemies, and even returned bodies for proper burial. It confused and unnerved the Council more than the military defeats. On Earth, the war was taking its toll. Captain Hyuk, who'd started this journey as a diplomat, hoping to make friends among the stars, now commanded a battle cruiser. He'd seen combat dozens of times, watched good people die, ordered strikes that killed enemies by the hundreds. The weight of it pressed down on him like a physical force. His ship, the Unity, encountered a crippled Vex transport drifting in space. Scans showed minimal weapons, mostly cargo. The smart tactical move was to destroy it and move on. Instead, Hyuk ordered rescue operations. The Vex crew was terrified when humans in combat armor boarded their vessel. They expected torture or execution. Instead, Hyuk's medics treated their wounded, provided food and water, and even helped repair their damaged systems enough to limp to a nearby Council outpost. Before releasing them, Hyuk recorded a message. "Tell your leaders that humanity doesn't want to exterminate the Vex. We don't want to conquer your worlds. We want to be left alone to chart our own course among the stars. This war ends the moment you accept that." The Vex crew departed, confused but alive. The message would spread through Council channels. adding to the growing belief that perhaps humans weren't the monsters they'd been portrayed as. Meanwhile, scientist Jian made a breakthrough that would change the war's trajectory. Studying captured alien shield technology, she'd discovered a fundamental flaw in how Council species approached defense. They used energy to deflect energy, creating fields that could absorb enormous amounts of damage. But Jian found a way to invert the principle, creating shields that converted incoming energy into power for the ship itself. The new shields were installed on a test vessel and performed beyond expectations. Enemy fire didn't drain the shields, it charged them. The harder the Council forces attacked, the stronger human ships became. Within weeks, the technology was being installed fleet-wide. But while humanity celebrated technical victories, the Council was preparing its final gambit. Supreme Commander Viscara had assembled a fleet of nearly 2,000 warships. Every species still loyal to the Council contributed what they could. It was the largest military force ever gathered in galactic history. The target was Earth itself. Vescar's plan was simple and brutal. Jump the entire fleet directly to Earth's solar system, overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers, and threaten to bombard the planet unless humanity surrendered unconditionally. It was a desperate move, all or nothing. Admiral Junho received intelligence about the gathering fleet from Seojun's hacking operations. He immediately began repositioning forces, calling back ships from offensive operations. But even with every vessel Earth could muster, he'd have less than half the numbers Viscara commanded. President Jiwan convened her military advisors. The room was tense, everyone aware of what was at stake. "Can we win?" she asked bluntly. Junho didn't hesitate. "Yes, but it will be costly. They have numbers, but we have better technology, better tactics, and we're defending our home. That counts for a lot. How costly?" Junho met her eyes. "We'll lose ships. We'll lose people. But if they reach Earth, we'll lose everything. So we stop them, whatever it takes." Jiwan nodded slowly. "Then stop them, Admiral. Show them why attacking Earth was their biggest mistake." The Council fleet arrived at Neptune's orbit in a massive wave, their ships blotting out the stars. Vescara stood on her flagship's bridge, surveying the human defensive positions. 400 ships against her 2,000. The outcome seemed inevitable. "All vessels advance," she commanded. "Destroy their fleet and position for planetary bombardment." The Battle of Neptune began with a thunderous exchange of fire. Council ships unleashed devastating barrages, energy weapons and missiles filling the void. But human ships didn't fall as expected. The new shields absorbed the attacks, converting them to power. Human vessels that should have been crippled instead accelerated, their weapons charging faster than normal. Junho commanded from the Indomitable, his tactical display showing the entire battlefield. "All wings, execute maneuver Theta." Human ships scattered, breaking formation in ways that seemed chaotic. The Council fleet moved to pursue, trying to pin down and destroy the smaller force. But it was a trap. The humans hadn't scattered randomly. They'd positioned themselves to create crossfire zones, each ship covering 2 others. When the Council forces tried to focus on individual targets, they exposed themselves to devastating flanking attacks. Captain Suo, commanding the carrier Inshin, launched wave after wave of fighters. The small craft darted through the battle space, targeting damaged enemy ships and finishing them off. His tactical officer Hayeri coordinated with other carriers, ensuring no section of space was left uncovered. The battle raged for hours. Ships died on both sides, brief flares of light marking where fusion reactors lost containment. But the human defenders were holding. More than holding, they were winning. Viscara watched in growing horror as her numerical advantage evaporated. For every human ship destroyed, She lost 4 or 5 council vessels. Her forces were dying faster than they could inflict casualties. "Fall back to defensive formation," she ordered, trying to salvage the situation. But Junho didn't give her the chance to regroup. "All ships full assault. Break their formation." Human vessels surged forward, pressing the attack with relentless aggression. They fought like cornered animals, which in a sense they were. This was their home, their planet, their species. Retreat wasn't an option. 72 hours after it began, the battle ended. The Council fleet was shattered. Less than 400 ships escaped, fleeing back into faster-than-light travel in a desperate rout. The rest were destroyed or disabled, drifting helplessly in Neptune's orbit. Jinho's fleet had lost 60 ships, but they'd won. Earth was safe. On her damaged flagship, Viscara stared at the tactical display showing the disaster. She'd brought the mightiest fleet in galactic history, and humanity had destroyed it. There was no recovering from this. The Council's military power was broken. With shaking hands, she opened a communication channel to Earth. "This is Supreme Commander Viscara to the human government. I request terms for peace negotiations." In the command center beneath Geneva, President Ji-wan allowed herself a small smile. "Request accepted. Cease all military operations and we'll meet to discuss terms." The war was over. Humanity had won. The abandoned space station called Horizon's End floated in neutral territory, equidistant from Earth and Council space. It had been a trading post centuries ago, before economic shifts made it irrelevant. Now it would host the most important negotiations in galactic history. President Ji-wan arrived aboard a small diplomatic shuttle, accompanied by Admiral Juno, Commander Hyuk, and Chief Diplomat Soman. The delegation was deliberately small, a gesture of confidence. They'd won the war. They didn't need to intimidate anyone. The Council's delegation was larger, representatives from every remaining member species. Viscara was there, her military uniform replaced with diplomatic robes. Thalos stood beside her, the ambassador who'd started this entire conflict with his arrogance. He looked much older now, his stone-like skin cracked with stress. The negotiations took place in Horizon's End's main hall, a circular room with viewports showing the stars. No weapons were allowed. No guards. Just leaders trying to find a path forward. Ji-wan opened the discussion with simple directness. "The Galactic Council attacked Earth without provocation. You lost. These are the terms for peace." She laid out humanity's demands. Full sovereignty for Earth and all human colonies, with no restrictions or oversight. Reparations for the cost of defending against the invasion, to be paid in technology sharing and resources. Complete restructuring of the Galactic Council to include human representation with equal voting rights. And finally, a mutual defense pact ensuring no species would face unprovoked aggression again. The Council representatives expected harsh terms. Demands for tribute, conquered worlds, subjugation. Instead, they got a framework for partnership. The confusion was visible on their alien faces. Thalos spoke hesitantly. "You could demand much more. Your military defeated ours decisively. By galactic law, Earth could claim conquest rights over our worlds." Ji-wan looked at him calmly. "We're not interested in conquest. We never were. All we wanted was to be left alone to grow and develop on our terms. You attacked us, and we defended ourselves. That's the end of it." "But your species," another representative interjected, a being that resembled a floating jellyfish. "We studied your history. Constant warfare, empire building, subjugation of weaker groups. We expected you to do the same to us." Hyuk, the former diplomat who'd witnessed firsthand how this war started, stepped forward. "You looked at our history and saw only the violence. You missed the other pattern. Yes, humans fight. But we also reconcile. We make peace with former enemies. We rebuild. We forgive. He gestured to the viewport, showing Earth in the distance. Our world has seen countless wars between nations, cultures, and ideologies. But look at us now, united, working together. The same nations that once fought to extinction now cooperate on everything from science to art. That's the pattern you missed. Soman, the chief diplomat, pulled up historical records on a holographic display. Images of reconciliation from Earth's history flickered past. Ancient enemies becoming allies. Former conquerors helping rebuild what they'd destroyed. Treaties that turned battlefields into trading partners. Humanity learned something your council apparently didn't, Soman explained. War is easy. Any species can fight. But peace, genuine lasting peace, requires something harder. It requires the ability to forgive, to understand, to grow beyond the immediate conflict. Veskara listened, her expression thoughtful. You could have destroyed our homeworlds. Your nanite weapons, your kinetic bombardments. You had the capability. Why didn't you? Junho answered, his voice carrying the weight of the battles he'd fought. Because destroying you wouldn't have solved anything. It would have created martyrs, inspired revenge, endless cycles of violence. We broke your military to prove you couldn't threaten us. But we left your civilians alive because we understood something important. He paused, making sure every representative was listening. You're not our enemies. Your leaders made bad decisions based on fear and arrogance. But the average citizen of your worlds? They're just people trying to live their lives. Why would we punish them for choices they didn't make? The council representatives exchanged glances. This was unprecedented in their experience. Strong species dominated weak ones. Winners took what they wanted from losers. That was the natural order they'd always known. But humanity was offering something different. Partnership instead of domination. Cooperation instead of subjugation. Over the following days, the negotiations continued. The Council agreed to all of humanity's terms. The Galactic Council would be dissolved and reformed as the Galactic Federation, with Earth as a founding member. Humans would help redesign the organization's charter, ensuring no species could be threatened the way Earth had been. The reparations were surprisingly light. Chiwon asked mainly for scientific knowledge and cultural exchanges. Technology that could help Earth develop faster, medical advances, agricultural techniques. In return, humanity offered its own innovations. The military technology that had won the war now repurposed for peaceful applications. The new shield systems could protect colonies from solar radiation. The autonomous mines could be reprogrammed for asteroid mining. The nanite technology could break down toxic waste or construct buildings at the molecular level. Every weapon humanity had created could be turned to constructive purposes. As the treaty was finalized, Thalos approached Iwan privately. The proud ambassador who'd threatened Earth months ago now seemed humbled, almost ashamed. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I judged your species based on incomplete information and my own prejudices. I saw primitives who needed to be controlled. I should have seen potential partners. Chiwon studied him for a moment, then extended her hand in the human gesture of reconciliation. Apology accepted. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next. Thalos tentatively grasped her hand, sealing the peace between their species. The Treaty of Horizon's End was signed by all parties. War crimes tribunals were established to judge those who'd committed atrocities on both sides. Humanity insisted on this, refusing to let their own soldiers escape justice if they'd violated the rules of war. This surprised the Council species once again, victors judging their own troops alongside the defeated, but it reinforced the message. Humanity played by rules, even when they didn't have to, 5 years passed. The galaxy transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The Galactic Federation functioned smoothly, with humans serving alongside aliens in every department. Earth's fleets, now designated the Federation Peacekeeping Force, patrolled the borders and responded to threats against any member species. Commander Suho, promoted to Admiral, commanded the flagship Inchin as it made routine patrols. His crew was diverse now, humans working alongside Vex, Thal, and a dozen other species. The former enemies had become friends, sharing meals and stories, learning from each other. Trade flourished between Earth and the Council worlds. Human art and music found enthusiastic audiences across the galaxy. Alien cuisine became popular on Earth. Students from 100 worlds studied at universities on both sides. Interspecies marriages weren't common yet, but they were happening. The Vex colony on Vexus II hosted a thriving human district. Former battlefields were turned into memorial parks where both species remembered the fallen and celebrated the peace they'd built. Thalos himself visited Earth as an ambassador of reconciliation, speaking to students about the mistakes his generation had made and the importance of understanding. Before judgment, President Jiwan, now in her second term, stood before the Federation Assembly and addressed the gathered representatives. 5 years ago, we were enemies. Today, we are partners. This transformation didn't happen because humanity was the strongest. It happened because we chose to build rather than destroy, to forgive rather than hold grudges, to teach rather than punish. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many beings as she could. Every species here has a violent past. Everyone has made mistakes. What defines us is not those mistakes, but how we move beyond them. The galaxy is better when we work together, when we share knowledge and resources, when we protect each other instead of threatening each other. The assembly erupted in applause. Limbs and appendages of various types, creating a thunderous sound. On Earth, a monument was unveiled in Geneva. Simple black stone carved with words in 100 languages. The English version read, "They declared war on the deadliest species in the galaxy. We responded by teaching them peace, because that was humanity's true strength. Not their ability to fight, though they'd proven that well enough. Not their technology or tactics, but their capacity to win a war and then win the peace. To destroy enemies utterly, or to transform them into friends. The galaxy had expected monsters when they looked at humanity's violent history. Instead, they found teachers who understood that the greatest victory wasn't defeating an enemy. It was making it so they were no longer enemies at all. Commander Hyuk, the diplomat who'd watched First Contact collapse into war, now served as Earth's ambassador to the Federation. He often thought about that first meeting, the threats and ultimatums. How different things could have been if the Council had chosen friendship instead of domination. But perhaps, he reflected, some lessons could only be learned the hard way. The galaxy had tried to subjugate humanity and learned they couldn't. But more importantly, they'd learned they didn't need to. That cooperation was stronger than conquest, that diversity was valuable. That different didn't mean dangerous. Humanity had gone to the stars seeking friends and found enemies. Through strength and compassion in equal measure, they'd turned those enemies into the friends they'd always wanted. And in doing so, they'd changed the galaxy forever. The war was over. The peace was just beginning. And both sides were better for it.